Hello friends, welcome back to the lectures of engineering thermodynamics. In the first lecture we have seen introduction to thermodynamics, then we have seen some of the basic terminologies that we are going to use in the entire subject thermodynamics, and the last topic that we have seen was the property, the thermodynamic property. What is thermodynamic property? What are their various types? And the types, I mean the intensive properties and the extensive properties. So out of that we have seen some of the properties are intensive, some properties are extensive properties. Now why these properties are necessary to study? That is to define the thermodynamic state of the system. Now what do you mean thermodynamic state? If I take down any thermodynamic system, as we have seen various types of thermodynamic system, open system, closed system, isolated system. But if we take down any one of the system into consideration, for example, a closed system having, this is a closed system, and into this closed system there is somewhat gas into it, but we cannot recognize the thermodynamic state of the system until and unless we specify some of the properties of this thermodynamic system. I mean, if simply thermodynamic system is there, it doesn't give any idea about the situation of the system, about the status of the system. For to get that idea, we must specify some of the properties, and once these properties are defined with certain numbers, then we will get the idea about the system. For example, if I say simply this has system, it has no meaning, or say I don't get any idea about the system. But if I say this particular system has a volume of about 1 liter, has the pressure of about 10 bar. Now with the aid of these two properties, I can get the idea like how much is the pressure over here. I mean, this is a pressurized system. This basic idea I will get, basic understanding I will have once I define two properties for this particular system, right? Instead of say 10 bar, if I put down a number over here, say like 100 bar, it means that I will understand the pressure is under a tremendous pressure of 100 bar. So I will get the idea about the system, and that is not about the state of the system, right? And any thermodynamic system, any state of the thermodynamic system can be defined by some of the thermodynamic properties, maybe at least 2 or 3 thermodynamic properties, and once 2, 3. Now it depends like how much number of properties we need to define. We will see how to get that number. But here we will see at least 2 thermodynamic properties which defines the state of the thermodynamic system. Now for example, in the same figure, in the same case, if I, instead of 1 liter, if I take down a volume of 1 meter cube, then I can represent the thermodynamic state. Here the topic of this topic name is thermodynamic state. Thermodynamic state of the system. Now the thermodynamic state of this particular system can be defined as 2 thermodynamic property. One is the pressure and second is the volume, and both the properties we have defined over here, we have specified over here. How much is the volume? Volume is 1 meter cube. So I can, if I take down the graph of pressure and volume for this system, then I will get the volume to be equal to 1 meter cube somewhere over here. Say this is 1 meter cube volume, and the corresponding pressure is maybe say 100 bar is over, or say 1, select in the first case take down it as 10 bar. So 10 bar pressure is over here. So this is, now if I take down these coordinates, I'll get a point over here, and there's a point A, and point A represents the thermodynamic state of this system. And even if I do not give the picture of this one or say any definite value over here, if I simply get the graph over here, and if I am able to locate the state with the aid of these two properties, then I can define the thermodynamic state of that system, and that state is defined by the point A. Just by looking at that point A and just measuring the coordinates of that point A, we can get the idea about that system. In another case, if I heat up this gas till the pressure is getting increased, say this is the P1, volume is constant, so another state I will be getting, I am going to heat up this gas continuously so that the pressure of this gas is increasing, say from 10 bar to another pressure, say like 50 bar. Now this is another state, and this state, second state, can be defined by one more point, and that point will be the volume is being the same 1 meter cube, it's over here, but the pressure now got increased to 50 bar. So 50 bar pressure and volume of 1 meter cube, it will be somewhere over here. Say this is the 50 bar pressure. This is 50 bar pressure, and that is defined by the point B. So point A and point B are two different thermodynamic states of the system. And in the, now this thermodynamic state A and B we have defined with the aid of pressure and volume of the system. It is not necessary always that we must have the pressure or volume of the system to define the state. Instead of pressure and volume, you can use any other property to define it. For example, volume and temperature, for example, enthalpy and entropy, or any two thermodynamic properties can define the thermodynamic state of the system, right? In some of the cases, we need to have third thermodynamic property also, since in some cases, in some system, two thermodynamic properties, even if two thermodynamic properties are given, still we cannot locate the point onto the property diagram. The reason is in two-phase system, for example, if there is water and steam combination, if the same is the system over here, and this system contains some water and some steam into it. So maybe in this case, if the steam is wet steam, if it is totally steam, only steam is over here, 100% steam, then only two properties can, with the aid of two properties, we can locate the thermodynamic state of the system. But in a case if the steam is wet with certain dryness fraction X, then we cannot define the thermodynamic state of this particular system with the aid of only two thermodynamic properties. Here we may need to go for the third thermodynamic property also. Why and how it is, that we will see afterwards in coming few lectures, right? So here we were talking about the thermodynamic state, and we have seen that thermodynamic state can be located with the aid of some thermodynamic properties. Now we will see what is thermodynamic process. This is what the state. Now the process. We will see what is thermodynamic process. Now, we have just seen any of the thermodynamic state can be defined by two thermodynamic properties, select PV, pressure and volume. Now in this case, now say this is the case of this system over here. This system is having certain gas into it and a piston over here, right? If I try to define the thermodynamic state of this system, what I need to do is I need to measure the volume. How much is the volume? Volume is this much. Say this is the volume V1, and whatever the pressure is, the pressure inside it is P1. If I know the value of P1 and V1 for that system containing air into a cylinder, piston cylinder arrangement, in that case I can locate the thermodynamic state, and the thermodynamic state is, say V1 is over here, and say P1 over here. So this is the P1 over here. So I can locate this thermodynamic state as the state 1, right? Now what I am going to do is for this system, let us consider that somewhat weight is kept over here, somewhat weight is kept over here, some weights, small weights are kept over here over the top of the piston, so as to maintain some higher pressure than that of the atmospheric pressure. Now step by step, if I start to remove the weight from here one by one, if I am taking out the weight, obviously the weight is acting in vertically downward direction. The total weight, what is the total weight? W is the pressure over here, P1, the term pressure P is defined as whatever the force acting, that is W divided by the area, So that will be the pressure acting onto this. But in a case if I am removing these weights slowly, what will happen? This W will reduce up and hence pressure P will reduce up. The pressure P will keep on decreasing. But simultaneously as the weight is get reduced, the pressurized gases will act over here and they will start to push the weights in upward direction, since in the latter stages the weight will be less. So the piston will start to move up. And step by step continuously if I am removing small weight from the top of the piston, so what will happen? The pressure will start to decrease step by step and the volume will start to increase, right? And if I try to measure the pressure and the volume continuously while I am lifting up the load, what will happen is, let us say at one instant the pressure has got dropped and the volume has got increased. How much is the increase in the volume that I have measured? Say like this is the V1. So V1 over here. So latter stage, say after removing some small weight, this much is the volume. Since volume is getting increased, pressure is getting reduced over here. So that value may be somewhere over here. So this is the next thermodynamic state. Again, if I remove some weight, pressure will again decrease, volume will increase. So thermodynamic state is over here. And in the similar manner, if I try to note down the pressure and volume, both the values, while I am removing the weights, and that too continuously if I am measuring pressure volume relation, and if I try to plot all these points, I will be getting the points to be something over here, something over here, something over here, something like this. And if I join all these points by a smooth curve, I will be getting a curve like this, and the final state is say over here where the volume is V2 and the pressure is P2. Now, the thermodynamic state of the system has got changed from the state 1 to the state 2. So, state 1 is one state, state 2 is another state. They are totally different for the same thermodynamic system. We perform some operation. What operation? We allowed the gas to expand by reducing the pressure. So, pressure is get reduced, the volume is get increased, and continuously the thermodynamic state of the system got changed from point 1 to point 1 to A to point B to point C to point D to point E and finally to point 2. So thermodynamic state of the system has got changed continuously, consistently by a small variation, and that is represented by the path 1 A, B, C, D, 2. So this path is nothing but the thermodynamic process. We are going to name various types of processes we will see, but this is not about the thermodynamic process. Thermodynamic process is nothing but the succession of change of thermodynamic state in a particular defined manner, and that is what the thermodynamic process is. Now there are various processes, various thermodynamic processes, for example constant volume process, constant pressure process, constant temperature process, we say it as isothermal process, adiabatic process, throttling process, isentropic process. So there are various thermodynamic processes that we will see in detail afterwards. Now we will see cyclic process and non-cyclic process. The next one is, here the processes will have two subtypes. One is the cyclic process and second is non-cyclic process. One is the cyclic process and second is non-cyclic process. Now before I proceed to these two types of processes, I would like to give you some idea about various types of processes over here. One is, now if I take down the PV diagram for any of the thermodynamic system, that is PV, then if I go for the constant pressure process, constant pressure means what? Pressure is constant, so this much is the pressure. So initial state is say state 1, and if continuously the volume of the system is getting increased, then and that at the constant pressure, the process will be over here, state 1 to state 2. And I will say this is constant pressure process. Since the pressure is being constant, the volume got increased. Whereas if I go from state 1 to state 2, keeping the volume same, I will say from state 1 to state 3, I will say this as the constant volume process, since volume at state 1 as well as volume at state 3 both are being the same. So this is the constant volume process. For a thermodynamic process like this, say another process like this, say 1 to 4, say 1 to 4. Now this is such a process where, see, both pressure variation is there, volume variation is there, but if the temperature is kept constant, then I will say this as the isothermal process. I will say the constant temperature process. So like that there are various processes. These processes we will see afterwards. Now we will see what is cyclic process and non-cyclic process. Now in the case if a thermodynamic system is following number of processes, and that too various types of processes that we have seen: constant pressure, constant volume, isothermal, adiabatic, isentropic, throttling process. So if a system is continuously following different processes and at the end it is coming back to the same initial state as it was, it means, see, once a system goes through a thermodynamic process, say this is again the PV diagram. If a system is going from one state 1, this is the state of the thermodynamic state of the system, and it follows one particular process. If it is following one particular process, means the thermodynamic properties will change. Obviously, if the thermodynamic properties are remaining at the same place, then there is no process at all. If the volume and pressure, if the pressure is P1 and volume is V1, so they are going to remain same, then we can't say that as a process. That is simply one particular state. But if a thermodynamic system is following a process, maybe constant volume heating process, constant pressure heating process, or say cooling process, or say isothermal compression, isothermal expansion, adiabatic compression, and so on. So in all these cases, the thermodynamic properties of that system will change, right? Let us see in some of the cases. For example, let us say there is one process starting from state 1 to state 2, and that is represented by the process 1 to 2 over here, 1 to 2. And this I will say 1 to 2 is the constant volume heating process. Obviously the volume is being constant. At state 1 volume is V1, at state 2 volume is again V1. So V1 is equal to V2, so the volume is being constant. Not simply at state 1 and 2, but if you take down any intermediate point of the process, everywhere the volume is being the same, that is V1, and we can say this as the constant volume process. Constant volume heating. Why heating? Since the volume is constant, means to consider one closed tank of a fixed volume, closed tank, rigid tank, whose volume cannot be changed, and if you simply heat it, what will happen with the pressure? Pressure will obviously increase, and that's why this graph. Otherwise, if you are cooling the constant volume of a gas, then its pressure will decrease. Now here the pressure is increasing, it means for sure it is a constant volume heating process. So a thermodynamic system followed one particular process 1 to 2, which is a constant volume heating process. Now from state 2 onwards, the system is following another process, and that I will say constant pressure heating process, and that I can represent by the curve, or say by the line 2 to 3. So this is constant pressure. Now why constant pressure? Since the pressure at point 2 is P2, pressure at point 3 is also P2, it is being the same. Not simply that, the pressure at every intermediate point of that process is being the same, and that is equal to P2. So it is the constant pressure heating process. So initially what happened is, the system was at the thermodynamic state 1, defined by the pressure P1 and volume V1. It followed one particular process, constant volume heating process, so that the pressure of the system got changed from P1 to P2. See, the thermodynamic, one of the thermodynamic properties got changed. Second is being constant. Next, in the second process, 2 to 3, that is constant pressure heating process, the volume of the thermodynamic system got changed from V1 to say V3 over here. So volume got changed, pressure is being the same. So again one more thermodynamic property got changed in second process. Let us say the thermodynamic system again following one more process, and that is constant volume cooling process. and that is up to here. Say, so as to get the same pressure as P1. So this is one more process. So 3 to 4 is one more process, and the name of that process will be, now obviously you can see that the volume at point 3 and volume at point 4 are being the same, that is equal to V3. So not simply that, the volume at any intermediate point during the process is also same, that is equal to V3 or V4, and that is over here. So I will say this is the constant volume cooling process. Why cooling? Since the pressure is get decreased from P2 to P1. And from from state 4, if the system is following one more process, and that is 4 to 1, that is again constant pressure process where the volume is get reduced. Constant pressure and volume is get reduced. It means what? Is it heating process or cooling process? Constant pressure is there, pressure is constant means weight over the piston is constant, and volume is decreasing means you are cooling the gases, right? So this is the process which is again a constant pressure cooling process. Since the pressure at the beginning of the process, at the end of the process, or at any intermediate point during the process, that is being same, and that is equal to pressure P1. So now I will say a thermodynamic system followed 4 processes. Process 1 to 2, constant volume heating process. Process 2 to 3, constant pressure heating process. Process 3 to 4, constant volume cooling process. Process 4 to 1, that is constant pressure cooling process. Now this is the first process. I will say 1 to 2 is the first process. This is the first process, right? And this is the last process. This is the last process, right? Now, if you check out the initial state of the system, initial state of the first process, that is represented by the point 1 over here. This is the process 1 to 2, and see, this is the initial state and this is the final state of the process 1 to 2. So this is the initial state of the first process, and if you check out the last process, that is 4 to 1, and if you check out the final state of the last process, the 4 to 1 is the final process, and the final state of the last process is again point 1. And if it is being the same, then we say that these processes are cyclic processes. I repeat once again, if the initial state of the first process, if initial state of first process is equals to the final state of the last process. Now if this condition is get fulfilled, then only we can say that process as the cyclic process. That as the cyclic process. Now here in this particular case I have shown 4 different processes, and that too I have shown simple processes, but not necessary in another cyclic process, not necessary that the system has to follow only 4 processes. There can be 3 processes, there can be 4, 5, even 10 processes, number of processes, there is no limit onto it. But the only limiting condition is that the initial state of the first process has to be the same as that of the final state of the last process. So the system will come back to the original state, and then we can say it as the cyclic process, right? So in another case I can say cyclic process, some examples of cyclic processes I would like to tell you. Say this is a cyclic process. For example, say this is 1 point, 1 to 2, then 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 1. Say 1, 2, 3, 4. Say 1 to 2 is the adiabatic compression process from point 1 having volume say volume over here is now will be different. Say this is the point 1, 1 to 2 is the adiabatic compression process, 2 to 3 is the constant volume heating process, say over here, 3 to 4 as the constant volume adiabatic expansion process, and 4 to 1 is the constant volume cooling process, and finally it is coming back to the same state, state 1, right? So I will say this is the cyclic process. Another example of the cyclic process I would like to give you. Say in a thermodynamic process, a thermodynamic system is following one process starting from the state 1 over here, 1 to 2 is one process. Now I am not going to name it. The volume is increasing, pressure almost constant. I'll say from here 1 to 2 is one process, then 2 to 3 is another process where the pressure volume got changed. 3 to 4 is one more process. It appears to be like constant volume process. 4 to 5 is another process where there is a decrease in the pressure, increase in the volume. 5 to 6, let us say this is the point 5 over here, 5 to 6 is another process. Say 6 to 7 is one more process, and 7 to 8 is another process. Say 7 to 1 is another process. Now how much processes are over here? How much thermodynamic processes are over here? Process 1 to 2 is the first process. This is the first process. This is the first process. 2 to 3 is another process. 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 1. Now this is the last process. Now if I check out the initial state of the first process is over here. Initial state of the first process is represented by the point 1. Whereas the final process is 7 to 1. What is the final state of the last process? This is the final process, last process, and the final state of the last process is represented by point 1 again. So I can say that the initial state of the first process is same as that of the final state of the last process, and hence this condition is get fulfilled. I can say that as the cyclic process. But in another case, instead of following this process, if a thermodynamic system is following, say 7 to 8 is over here, say 7 to 8 is over here, and that's the end. So in this case, this is the last process. So a system is followed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are the processes. The final state of the last process is represented by point 8, and the initial state of the first process is represented by point 1. These two states are not same. They are represented by different points over here. You can see clearly point number 1 is over here, point number 8 over here. So these 2 points are same. So I will say the initial state of the first process and the final state of the last process are not same. So I will say that process as non-cyclic process. This is the non-cyclic process. Hope you understand this. Okay. So let us move ahead for the next topic. Now we are going to see one of the most fundamental law of thermodynamics, and perhaps most easy too, and that is zeroth law of thermodynamics. I personally feel that this is the most easy and most fundamental law of thermodynamics, which is based upon the thermal equilibrium, the concept of thermal equilibrium. Now what this law says, if there are 3 bodies, say body A. Now before we go to the concept of thermal equilibrium, concept of zeroth law of thermodynamics, let us understand what is thermal equilibrium. Thermal equilibrium means that if I am having two objects, say if I am having two chalks over here, if I am having two devices over here, say one is this set square and this is a duster. Now, if this object has a temperature, say this object has a temperature 20 degrees Celsius, this one, which is equal to the room temperature. This duster is also having the temperature of about 20 degrees Celsius, close to it. Even if we measure it up to its accurate level, the temperature of this object is 20 and this object is also 20. Now, if the temperature of this body, first body, is same as that of the temperature of the second body, then I will say these two bodies are in thermal equilibrium with each other. I repeat, if the temperature of first body is same as that of the temperature of second body, then I will say these two bodies are in thermal equilibrium with each other. That is the condition for two bodies to be in thermal equilibrium. And obviously, if the temperature is being the same and if I bring these two objects in contact with each other, there will not be any heat transfer taking place in between them. So that is the thing about the thermal equilibrium. But if I take down another object like this chalk which is at the room temperature, which is 20 degrees Celsius, and if you take down, say like my own body, my body temperature close to 98 Fahrenheit or say 36, approximately 36 degrees Celsius. So temperature of this chalk is 20 degrees Celsius and temperature of my body is about 36 degrees Celsius. So these two temperature of this body, my body is the first one and the chalk is the second body if I consider, then the temperature of first body is not same as that of the temperature of the second body. So these two bodies are not in thermal equilibrium with each other, right? Some other examples, so like if any two human bodies, healthy human bodies, if you are not suffering from fever or say any kind of illness, then almost every human body will have the same temperature, right? So any two human bodies, if they are healthy and not going through suffering from any illness or say fever, then these two bodies I will say are in thermal equilibrium with each other. But in the case your body, if you consider yourself as one body and your friend's body, your another friend, and who has the fever, obviously fever means what? You might have seen doctor check up your temperature, body temperature, and normal body temperature is about 98 degree Fahrenheit, and if a person having a fever, say whose temperature will be more than 98 degree Fahrenheit, so about 100 degree Fahrenheit. So there will be a temperature difference between these two bodies. So we cannot say these two bodies are in thermal equilibrium with each other. So this is all about the concept of thermal equilibrium. Now come to the concept of zeroth law of thermodynamics. Now let us say there are three bodies, body A, then body B, then body C. So these are three bodies separated away from one another. Then zeroth law of thermodynamics states that if body A is in thermal equilibrium with body B, what does it mean? Body A is in thermal equilibrium with body B. This is thermal equilibrium. Body A is in thermal equilibrium with body B. It means that temperature of body A is equal to temperature of body B. And body B is in thermal equilibrium with body C. Again, this body is in thermal equilibrium with body C. So this is again in thermal equilibrium. So what is the condition for the thermal equilibrium? TA has to be equals to TB, that is temperature of body A has to be equal to temperature of body B, and we are again saying that the body B is in thermal equilibrium with body C. It means that this is TB is equal to TC. It has to be there. Then body A and C, body C, are in thermal equilibrium with each other. TA has to be equal to TC. That is what the zeroth law of thermodynamics is. As easy as this. I repeat the statement for the zeroth law of thermodynamics. If body A is in thermal equilibrium with body B and if body B is in thermal equilibrium with body C, then body A and C are in thermal equilibrium with each other. So that's what the zeroth law of thermodynamics, and that is the foundation for the concept of temperature. Now we will see a few more laws that we have already seen in earlier standard. One is the law of conservation of energy, and second is the law of conservation of mass. Whereas both the laws are very closely linked with one another. Earlier it was considered that these two laws are different, but it was Albert Einstein who proved these laws are not different, they are being the same. Now let's see what is that. Law of conservation of energy. Every one of you knows what is this law of conservation of energy. I would like to define it as the energy can neither be created. I hope all of you know what is energy. Energy is nothing but it is the capacity to do work, capacity to do some useful work. The law of conservation of energy states that energy can neither be created nor it can be destroyed, but it can be transferred from one form into another form. The total amount of energy of the universe or an isolated system remains constant. So this is what the law of conservation of energy that we have already studied, and lot of examples also we have studied. But the only thing is it will be better if you go for, see, we know that there is one form of energy, say like chemical energy. Let us say chemical energy of the fuel. Once you burn the fuel, that will get converted into the internal energy. That internal energy can be converted into the mechanical work with the aid of some device like engine work. So these energy conversion we have seen, and we have talked a lot about these energy conversions. But I give you one exercise as a homework. Try to find out these energy conversions in any energy conversion process, any energy conversion, whether it is the solar energy to the heat energy, chemical energy to the internal energy and into the work energy, electrical energy into the mechanical work into the again thermal energy. So any energy conversion you want to take down, take it, and just verify by taking down the numerical values. If the chemical energy is there, how much is the chemical energy? So like 100 unit of chemical energy is there. When it is get converted into the internal energy, it has to be 100 unit. When it is get converted into the work energy, it has to be 100 unit. And that's what the law of conservation of energy is. In a case if 100% conversion is not possible, then you find out how much is that. For example, if this is 100 unit, this is 100 unit of chemical energy, and out of that 100 unit, only 80 unit of energy is get converted into the internal energy. Then find out how much is the 20 unit of energy is going, maybe leaking through, through in the form of waste or say unburned gases. Again will remain, sorry, this will be 20 unit of energy will be missing somewhere. From out of this 80 joule of energy, if you are able to convert only 10 joule of energy into the mechanical work, then where does that 70 unit of energy is going? You find out, if you take down any of the energy conversion process, take down the actual numerical values of that energy level and its conversion level, and try to verify the law of conservation of energy, and you will find it to be correct. If you are not getting the correct answer, then for sure you are missing something, otherwise law of conservation of energy can't be wrong. Right? Have this practice for at least 2 to 3 energy conversion processes. Right? The next one is the law of conservation of mass. The law of conservation of mass. Mass is a very fundamental thing. Mass, all of you know mass. Say this chalk has certain mass. So whatever the thing I am going to do with the mass of this object will remain same. This object, in the sense, the mass of this matter will remain same. If I take down this object and weigh it, say I am getting it to be select 10 gram. If I crush it, still it will be having 10 gram of mass. If I heat it, will have the mass 10 gram. If I burn it and convert it into the gas, it will have the mass of 10 gram. So under any circumstances, whatever the thermodynamic process or even non-thermodynamic processes you want to do with the object, with the matter, the mass of that matter will remain same. It will not change, and that is what the law of conservation of mass is. It states that the mass can neither be created nor be destroyed, but it can be transferred from one location to another location, can be converted from one form to another form. The total amount of mass of the universe will remain constant, and that's what the law of conservation of mass is. There is only one point where the law of conservation of mass is not applicable. If we take down the law of conservation of mass as it is, as the word, that is in the nuclear reaction. In the nuclear reaction, there is a concept of mass defect. In case of nuclear fusion or nuclear fission, what happens is, in the nuclear reaction, the mass of reactant is not same as that of the mass of the product, and the difference of these two masses, we say it as the mass defect. And now the question is, now if it is so, the mass of reactant is not equal to the mass of the product, then whether the law of conservation of mass is wrong. It is not so, it is not wrong. It was Albert Einstein who related the law of conservation of mass and the law of conservation of energy, and he brought these two laws together, and he formed one more statement, that is the law of conservation of mass and energy. That is, the mass and energy can neither be created nor be destroyed, but they can be converted from one form to another form. And mass is, and he proved that mass is also a form of energy. Mass is also the form of energy, and the mass can be converted into the energy, as well as the energy can be converted into the mass, right? And the famous equation, all of you know, that E is equals to delta mc square, where E is the energy, delta m is the mass defect in case of the nuclear reaction, that is the difference in the mass which is going to vanish up, and that vanished mass will get converted into its equivalent of amount of energy by multiplying it to a number which is the square of the speed of the light, that is 8 into 10 to the power 3 meter per second. So if you are having the mass defect, you can find out the vanished mass, you can find out the equivalent energy of it, and if you are converting the energy into the mass, then you can find out with the aid of this equation. So this is what all about the law of conservation of mass and energy. I think we should stop over here for today's lecture. We will continue some of the thermodynamic processes in the next lecture. Thank you.